All right, Nick Kirby here. Pleased to be joined by Snowden of Just Baseball. As if you're listening to this, it's probably the first day of the last series of the season for the Cincinnati Reds, but a busy week nonetheless for the Cincinnati Reds with, of course, firing David Bell. And I want to get Clay's perspective on this because I always think Clay has a pretty good measured perspective, a little bit different than me a lot of times too. So I think it's kind of a good difference of opinion on some of these things. So Clay, first off, how you doing, my friend? How's your week? You ready for this season to kind of be over?
I am. I'm doing great. Those who may have seen me before, I'm kind of in an away situation here. I had to record from my kitchen tonight, so if it sounds weird or looks different, that's why. Um, I'm actually excited. Like red specific, I'm ready. Like I am done. I'm ready for it to be over with. Like baseball specific, like I was locked in. I just was watching Twins Marlins, man. Like I'm still locked in, probably more than I ever am. I'm usually kind of burned out this time of the year, but I don't know, man. I just love the race this year.
Yeah, there's been a lot of exciting races down the stretch here. There'll be a lot of teams either in the playoffs for the first time or not as familiar of faces, and I think that's going to be exciting. We'll table some of that talk because I might want to get some more of your thoughts on that here in the coming weeks. But uh, let's start with the news that most people, I'm assuming, tuning into a Chatterbox Red show on a Friday morning are probably wanting to hear about. And we want to hear Clay Snowden's perspective on the Reds firing David Bell. What was your thoughts? Were you shocked at this move?
I was not shocked at all. In fact, it's exactly what they needed to do, in my opinion. In sports, fair or not, and I'm not even talking about um, personal opinions and what's right or wrong. Like, just look at sports and how it works. When your team doesn't have a successful run in 6 years, the quote unquote head coach, or in this case, manager, leaves. That's just how it works in sports, right or wrong. So I expected it to happen. I personally wanted it to happen. And it has nothing to do with like, I think David Bell is the worst manager ever, as much as it is like, okay, like if you were in a position where the leader of your group hasn't quite, breached the threshold that you're looking to breach in 6 years, you want new messaging, you want a fresh face. It inspires, just new energy within the clubhouse. So I personally like the move. I wrote an article saying it's the easiest move, though. It should not be the biggest move of the offseason. It should not be the most important move of the offseason. There needs to be more. This was the easy move. Scapegoat is out. Pressure now is on Nick Kroll, who is kind of second in line. If it doesn't go right, like you know how these things work, Nick. Ownership does not fire themselves. So now the next in line to get fired if things don't go well is Nick Kroll, right or wrong.
Let's talk about that scapegoat because I'm curious if your thoughts on making this move and this change, your thoughts would change if you get to this offseason and the Reds do literally just about nothing. Do you change your mind on this move? Does it make you more upset or feel differently that this move was just a scapegoat move to give the fans, throw a large portion of the fan base a bone?
No, I think I use scapegoat there as more just like here's just somebody that has to go because things didn't go wrong. You got to start somewhere. Um, I would say what you're describing is something like if the Dodgers were to fire Dave Roberts for them not winning it all. Like he's obviously not the biggest problem there. That's more of that situation. I don't think David Bell is particularly good at his job. I always ask people that say they want to keep him. What did he show over 6 years that made you think he was special? Not that made you think he was bad, but made you think he is not, replaceable. I personally did not see anything that jumped out to me that said, if the Reds let go of him, man, they're going to come to regret this. I didn't personally see that. To me, let's move on. And like I said, fresh voice, maybe some changes in philosophy, whatever it may be, I'm ready because whatever was happening wasn't successful. Let's try something different.
Let me challenge you on this though, because I kind of reached the point at the end of that where I didn't really care, to be honest. I was kind of over it, and I personally would have kept him, but at this point, it wasn't worth
Yeah.
the argument for the most part. But let me challenge you on this. The downside that I see is you never had any issues with David Bell. You never had that San Diego Padres clubhouse blow up. We've seen it with other teams. Next year, the Reds bring in a manager and it just completely falls on its face. Not wins and losses, but the clubhouse. That's the only downside that I see. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a scenario that could happen, but I can't think that you work in that avenue if you're in professional sports. You can't say, "Oh, well, this is just okay. Let's just continue with it." You have to change, you have to adapt. And if it falls flat on your face, it goes back to the person who hired them. That's why these are very difficult jobs with a ton of interviews. And it's not as easy as, oh, Barry Larkin, let's bring him on down. Like it's much more than that. But if it does fall on its face, like you said, then like I don't know what to say. Like it wouldn't surprise me. Nothing would surprise me at this point. But I don't think that you can like make the decision in the avenue of everything was okay. Let's just keep it okay.
I agree. I don't think you can completely live in fear, but I do think that is the one downside that doesn't get
Yeah.
mentioned. And
Yeah.
I just feel like it is worth mentioning, even though I generally agree with what you said.
Yeah.
All right, so Clay, who's going to be the next Reds manager? I mean,
It's
throw me your golden ticket here.
Nick, you are not going to like me. I don't know. And the reason why, and let me just explain. And I know everyone wants to come with their names and their reasons. It's the exact same thing we see in college football. Coach leaves, every fan panics. Somebody at ESPN or Fox tweets out a list of 4 names they've never heard of. And an hour later, I'm an expert on all these names. I know exactly why I want them and why I don't want them. To me, when it comes to searching for a manager, I personally don't know enough about the ins and outs. Think of how long, if someone said, like, describe David Bell, like, it probably took you more than a year or 2 of watching him every day before you could confidently say so. So you can go with what others say. That's typically what I do, is just kind of ask people that I think are smarter than me what they think, and kind of read up as I can. But I don't have a educated guess or opinion of my own. I know that prior to the year, and as recently as last week when this happened, or earlier this week, I guess, Skip Schumacher was a name that was mentioned to me by somebody who I really trust, and not as like this is a source, as in like, hey, I think that would be a good fit. I don't know, man. Like I know that people like and dislike things, so I'm long-winded answer for I really just don't know.
What would you want that would be different from David Bell?
I think the biggest issue I had with David Bell was not only some of the lineup construction, every single manager will have fans complaining about that, by the way. So that's just kind of like checkbox, have to say that about a manager. In terms of just like personality, like I just hated the way that he talked to the media. It was so dull, it was so lifeless. And I don't know if that translates into the dugout. We don't, or excuse me, into the clubhouse. Like we don't get to know that. Player said he was nice, great, all that. But like to me, it's like I want somebody with a little more conviction when they speak, to say the least. I want somebody who, in terms of like actual X's and O's, like the base running stuff, like I actually did not mind the base running aggressiveness in the beginning of the year. It felt like it kind of got away, slipped away a little bit. Um, I still want somebody who's aggressive on the base paths. Maybe not to the extent of just like Buck Wild out here, but somebody who's willing to steal bases. I love that. And I think that with this Reds team in particular, that's going to be a big part of their identity. Other than that, I really don't know what else I would want besides I would personally like somebody who has actually managed before and had some variance of success. I know you can't always get that, um, but I think that this team kind of needs somebody who has at least had some years of managerial experience. Like a brand new person to managing, I think would be a big whiff.
Okay, so you feel pretty strongly that you want someone that has managed in the big leagues before?
Yeah, I do. And I know that's kind of old school or pointing towards old school people probably, but like you said, like if this falls, flat on its face or whatnot, like I guess my mentality for that is more or less I'm just so scared of it being the wrong person. Like if they hire somebody who has not been a manager before, like it's not like I don't think they can work out. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just scared of it being the wrong person. I'd like somebody with some track record to at least have us go off of instead of these ideas of what could be. We saw that with David Bell when he was brought in that same manner, and it didn't work out. And that's one situation. They're all independent. I understand that, but I guess that's kind of making me scared to go down that path again.
So I'm gonna look through the odds list here, and I'm gonna ask you about the guys that actually do have managerial experience and kind of get your thoughts on them. So
Mhm.
obviously you mentioned Skip Schumacher, Terry Francona, David Ross, Gabe Kapler, Scott Service, Aaron Boone if he would somehow get fired, Don Mattingly, Brad Ausmus. That is the extent of the list of guys that made the odds makers list that have managerial experience. Anyone in that list stand out to you? Anyone in that list that would be a hard no for you?
Francona, obviously, like I think that's the home run. I don't think it's, I don't really know what his situation is and like how interested he would be in all of that. So I would love that personally. He's been successful a couple different places. David Ross, like, man, I I don't think so, man. Like, I just don't think so. Who else was on there? I know Brad Ausmus was the automatic no for me. I just did not like him but that was years ago when
Scott
he was
Scott Service.
Scott Service. I just don't really know much about him as a manager, like ins and outs and stuff.
The Mariners, I mean, they did have a pretty decent run. I mean, I know they didn't get
Yeah,
ultimately where they want. I mean, they currently have 82 wins. They're going to miss the playoffs, but um, that's
yeah,
better than the Reds. The year before 88, 90 wins.
yeah,
So I mean, again, how much of that was Scott Service? How much of that was the team? Did they overachieve the energy? I don't know, but that's a decent track record right there. Gabe Kapler, that's
yeah. I'm not the biggest Gabe Kapler fan. Just like his personality is very unique. Um, he was hired. I think he was in Philadelphia initially. That didn't go well. Then he went to the Giants and like, man, like just wins and losses and whatnot. That's fine. He was big with platooning and whatnot and stuff that we've kind of grown to like, and it's shown value at times. So I don't think that that's like a oddball fit. I just don't really know if I'd like to have Gabe Kapler. It just doesn't really sit right with me for some reason.
there's nothing better than going to a live sporting event. I know that I've made some of my best memories there, and it may be off season for our beloved Cincinnati Reds. But you have the Bengals, FC Cincinnati, UC football, and plenty of college basketball in the area. And the best place for me to always find tickets and know that I'm getting the best price is the Game Time app. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Some of my other favorite features on the Game Time app, you can see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy. They have an event cancellation protection also, automatic full refunds for tickets that are canceled or not rescheduled. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CINCY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CINCY, CINCY, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? Game time. We also want to remind you that you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a place to get support for anything related to mental health. Whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between, it's a 100% confidential, secure, and anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 988 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay. If somehow Aaron Boone got fired, What would your thoughts be there?
I like Aaron Boone. Like, I think he does a good job, and I like how he addresses the media, and he's more of an open book, which is kind of how I am as a person too. Like, I'm pretty straightforward and cut and dry, and he's that way as well. So, like, obviously, like I'm probably going to naturally lean towards people like that. So, I think that would be good. And he's had experience at the biggest market with the most pressure. Like, he's been at the top in terms of just what situations he's been put in, and um, somebody like that, I mean, yeah, I would be all about that actually.
I feel like Francona and Boone, I think we actually agree with this. I think those are the two
Yeah,
almost
those
automatic hires for me if they were interested in this job.
and
Everyone else, I kind of, some I like more, some I don't,
yeah,
but
and
those are the
it
two like automatics for me.
whoever's listening to this right now, just like think about managers of other teams and think of if you knew their name before they became a manager too. Like, it just shows you like half the time we don't really know what's gonna happen. And half the time, like Nick said, it could be somebody who does not have experience, and next thing you know, they're doing a great job. So who really knows? It's always this. It's a fun thing to discuss, but at the end of the day, like we'll see who's hired, and then we'll start watching and see how they do and grade it from there.
All right, two more names before we move on to some other talk. I have to ask you about Barry Larkin because that is, I think, going to be. I don't think he ends up getting the job, but I do think that his name is going to
Yeah,
continue to permeate around this conversation until this job is announced. And I also think there might be some ramifications between him and his relationship with the Reds if he doesn't get the job afterwards.
which is fine if you ask me. If bottom line, I love him, and he was a great player, and I loved watching him play. I find myself far too often just asking myself, like, what the heck did he just say? Not like no one has ever formed the thought that Barry Larkin just did, and not in a positive way. Again, this is just my opinion. Um, I just don't really love the way that he kind of approaches the game at times. And we hear it on the broadcast. He'll walk you through his thought process. I don't agree with it. He knows a lot more about baseball than me. I know people are saying that, and they're right, but I personally don't think that it would work out well. And I think that is setting yourself up for a very difficult future. If it's not perfect, are you going to fire Barry Larkin? The guy who was the captain, the guy who spent his whole career in Cincinnati, like, he's going to have a longer leash than anybody else. And, if it worked out, awesome. If it doesn't, it's going to be very difficult to move on from.
Yeah, and the whole like experience thing, like, and he played and he was great and he's a Hall of Famer. And there's been other Hall of Fame baseball players that were atrocious managers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily equate to having any success. I would even venture to say that uh, I, I haven't done a full study on this, but I would think that almost the higher career wins above replacement players probably perform worse as a manager
Yeah. Yeah.
than the career minor leaguers or the guys that were
Yeah.
bench guys or
No, you're right. I mean, I think you're right. If you think about it, like how many like really successful baseball players were really successful managers, like it's not a long list.
yeah. I have to ask you about this one. I completely scoffed the first time I saw this and thought this is ridiculous. And I thought about it a little more. I still think it's very, very far fetched, but I don't think it was not worth mentioning. So Mark Sheldon in his newsletter mentioned Luke Maile as the last option. And overall, I was like, yeah, that's not gonna happen. There's no chance. That was really wild to even put that on there. And then I thought, you know what? Hey, maybe it's worth at least mentioning. And the reason I say is because, the Reds just played the Cleveland Guardians. Their manager was Steven Vogt. He, I think, literally played last year in the big leagues, and he is now a manager. So it's not necessarily unprecedented. It
Yeah.
literally has happened. So I do think it was maybe worth mentioning. I know Luke Maile has a lot of respect. I would be hard pressed if the Reds would go that route. But if they did, I just want to say, I want to, and this is maybe I'm trying to make a little bit too much of a hot take scenario here. So I apologize, Clay, but it is kind of my job as a content creator here. Reds hire Luke Maile tomorrow. Clay Soda's reaction would be,
I would be pissed. I do not like that at all. Like the Stephen Vogt thing is interesting, but he did not leave the Athletics and become their manager immediately. This guy's been in the clubhouse now 2 seasons, chopping it up with these guys. Now you're going to ask him to immediately turn around and have to be hard on them, or pinch hit somebody in a situation where they don't want to get pinch hit for. Like, I don't think it's out of the question that he could have a managerial career at some point. That's fine. I think it is ridiculous to what do you do? Pick up his club option and say, "Hey, man, now you're on the bench for good." Like, I don't know how that works, but I would think that is just like completely unserious, to be honest with you. And it's nothing against him personally. It's just the process, and like the Reds taking that large of a roll of the dice, in my opinion, is just like something that they can't afford to do. They can't afford to get cute with the manager position and just like, hey, our backup catcher who kind of sucks now is just going to be the manager.
all right, good stuff. All right, Reds off season. Clay Snowden, you're placed in charge tomorrow. What is the first couple of things you do?
Oh man, the first thing I would do, I think before you even get into free agent talk, like you need to scatter around and figure out which players you can acquire in a trade. And that might look like the name that pops to my mind is Mark Canha when he was traded last offseason to the Tigers. He was traded at kind of a weird time, like early in the offseason, because of the option he had. The Tigers wanted to pick up his options. The Brewers did not. So they got him really inexpensive. That type of thing like could work where there's a player out there, and I don't have the name off the top of my head, but whose option may not be picked up and you can pick it up, trade next to nothing for them. Like that's kind of a savvy way to kind of in a way like sign a free agent. You just get them before they become a free agent. I think that the Reds have to do better in the outfield. I love Will Benson. Like I love that guy. I do not think you can count on him. If you are going to continue, the trend is supposed to go like this. Will Benson is not going like this right now. He has options. It's perfectly fine. Everyone thinks sending someone to the minors is a big, oh my gosh, he's ruined. Like, it's okay if he's a 4A player and you call him up with injury. You call him up when someone else struggles. Like, let him figure it out. Like, there's nothing wrong with that at all in my mind. I think outfield, there's just too many questions. I like Friedel and I like all of the options. I don't love any of the options, to be honest with you. And if the trend's continuing to go like this, like I said, like you're just going to have to get better players. It's that simple. Trade, free agency, with Nick Kroll saying that he is still going to operate like a small market club. I know a lot of people took that as they're never going to spend money. And, if that's the truth, so be it. You can trade. Like that's still a thing. I think the Reds have enough young, attractive talent that they can trade and be okay with it. And if this whole mentality of we're going to build through the draft, well, that draft happens every year. You get to reload every year. And if you are so good at drafting that you just think you can build your whole team through that pipeline mostly, then you shouldn't care about trading a couple here and there when the timing's right, when the team life cycle fits it. So to me, it's okay, trade a couple guys if that's the way you want to do it. Address outfield. I would pay money for a catcher to be a 1B to Tyler Stevenson, a better backup. The backup situation's been pretty disastrous for the most part of the past 5 or whatever seasons. One injury away from really ugly at catcher. So I would pay, somebody $5, $6, $7 million, 1 or 2 year deal, AAV that is, and have a better situation there. Depending on trades, what happens throughout the infield, that's a different topic for a different day. Too many moving parts to break down right now. And in terms of a starting pitcher, Nick, that's where I was thinking like, yeah, let's do it. And now I'm thinking like, it's not the number one priority. I'd welcome it if it's somebody who has that bucket of one or two in a rotation. I'm good on like signing a Frankie Montas and whatnot. Like I want somebody with a higher upside, and if you trade them for them or sign them or whatever, awesome. If not, like I'm pretty good with what they have right now. Bring back Junis or Martinez. Like honestly, after this long-winded answer, I'm gonna say signing Nick Martinez may be like let's do that today. Let's get the contract situation figured out.
I think it's going to be a qualifying offer, and I think
Yeah.
there's a good chance he accepts. There's been a lot of players accept. I think there might have been one all time, but he would be right there. It'd be hard for him to say no to
Well,
that.
I guess with his age and like to me, if I'm him, like I would take less money for years. I want the stability of years
Yeah.
after kind of having to go overseas, come back and forth with like Padres contracts and now Reds. Like I would say, like, listen, give me 4 years, 15 million or whatever the more, I don't know, whatever it may be. I would want years over just accepting a qualifying offer, honestly.
Because it's hard to see him next year increasing his value.
Right.
Like it seems like even if I think he'll be a good pitcher next year,
Yeah.
but is he going to increase his value? I don't know. Maybe another year, like it gives him more of a data, but then he's another year older. He's 35 at that point, so it's kind of.
I agree with you. Like, I don't think it's like suddenly gonna be going on an upward trend. Like, I think this is either like what he is or even better than what he is. And if I'm him, I'm going for years instead of.
But it's tough. I mean, if he declines the qualifying offer,
Yeah.
then a team has to give him a draft pick. And are you giving him a draft pick for Nick Martinez, right? I mean, I know if it's under 50 million total,
Yeah.
which you would think he's going to be under 50 million, even if it's 4 years, 40 million or 3 years, 40, whatever. It's a lower draft pick, but teams covet those draft picks a lot. And I don't know. He might kind of just say, I don't really love this, but I kind of have to accept it. I mean, he did sign a 2-year contract with the Reds, so it's not necessarily like he's getting screwed here.
Yeah.
He's getting a pay raise, but that'll be the most interesting, one of the most interesting things I think that we track this offseason is does the Reds offer it? Does he accept it? And then where does it go from there? Well, Clay, I really appreciate your time as always. Love your insight into all things Reds, and I certainly will bug you many times this offseason for content after we both kind of digest this season and take a little mental break and have some fresh perspectives as we delve into the offseason.
Absolutely. Appreciate you.